I'm a survivor. Like I survived. I'm gonna survive in any way that I have the ability to, but I'm not gonna be limited by whatever the situation is. Ironically, I have that realization. I'm like, yeah, I'm in it. They knock me out and they put me in the ambulance and I flatline on the way to the hospital. So as soon as I say I'm not gonna die, then I die. So technically, it was a death experience briefly.
Metaphor in here, right? I mean, beyond like, I mean, here you are holding on, but as soon as like they get okay, we're good. That's when things kind of
Yes.
almost like
I didn't die in the car as I'm bleeding out, but
Right,
in the
right,
ambulance, all of a sudden, in the controlled environment where they're supposed to save you, I'm dying.
Shift happens, opportunities change, and success is a choice. So when shift happens, it is our choice. Either we let shift happen or we can make shift happen.
Yeah. So touching on identity shift and going back to this idea. So like, let me give you an example. Okay. So like an example of that would be, okay. So previous to the accident. Okay. So BA before accident for me, that Thom would have never have saw a Craig speaking somewhere and said, oh my gosh, I want to talk to that guy. Reached out to him and said, let's just talk.
Yeah.
Right. Before accident, Thom never would have done that. Before accident, Thom always had a reason to look, no matter what I did or accomplished or all that stuff, I always had a reason to say, I'm not ready for whatever that was. My identity was tied to that mindset of one day I'll be good enough for this, that, or the other. Right.
With a little,
yeah. And imposter syndrome is rampant. Like I think more people than want to admit have that, even people from high, authority positions, right? I mean, you've seen the top of the tree, like it's not that much different.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, I think that we can be in this place where once again, we think that we have infinite moves. We think that we're going to reach this false goalpost one day and we will have a false arrival moment that never comes.
Totally.
Right. So when I reach this metric, and that goes back to the zeros paradox, and it kind of ties in because part of what fuels this paradox of chasing these zeros and metrics is the reality is you're chasing an identity. You're trying to grasp an identity. And that's why, we were kind of talking about that idea of success, like success initially, any high producer taking out of context the industry, success initially starts with very admirable reasons, right? I was not raised in a well-off household. This, that, it's usually adversity or there's something that's noble about the pursuit of success initially until you reach a point of success where the only thing that feels good is more success. So, I mean, not to say that it is a drug, but I do think in a lot of ways it shares very similar characteristics to drug use.
Sure.
Because
it's an addiction.
Yeah, it's an addiction. And anything can be addictive, at some point. And so, but success is not the enemy, like at all. And that's where, we were kind of talking at one point. I told you I restarted my book. I started writing a book. I got about a third of the way through and I was like, this doesn't feel right. And I had to shelve it and kind of restart on something. But part of the issue that I was dealing with is like, I didn't have this paradox really worked out at that point. I knew that there was a couple pieces that I was trying to reconcile. And I'm like, how do they interact with each other? How do I measure this? And that's why this paradox started to form, because I was like, this seems it doesn't seem like it should align, but it very much does interact with one another, right? This idea of, well, I'm not anti-success, but I am definitely, I value impact now.
Well, what I'm also hearing too.
Yes. And it's not also linear to just metrics that in a certain segment, right? That's just one facet of that. And I think going back to this idea of the crawl and going through that, one of the things that the crawl highlighted, and we kind of touched on this from the meeting that we had earlier. So we had a meeting earlier and somebody was sharing, that their mission was tied to their family, right? It's tied to my children and all that. And I think that's the easy answer. Right. Everybody. And that's why, some, like if you like Hermosi, for example, Layla and Alex, they've talked about how having children is selfish, right? Which as a parent does not feel selfish. But I see the fact that
I think the children are the selfish ones.
Yeah, no, they are. They are. But in the context of how they've explained it, there's some merit to it because they explain it as, well, children are a very easy mission to get behind, right? Like I have to do something for these people, and you sort of get off the hook from like doing something.
Can become like almost a coat of arms.
It does, yeah. And it's a really simple like, oh yeah, and that's why people have a hard time letting go of being a parent because you're only a parent for a short time, right? You're just saying like it flows, and then you're starting to reconcile. Now my kid's gonna be out of my house. Yeah. What the fuck did I spend the last like 18 years doing with my life? Right. Like I thought I was this person, and then one day one day you're somebody's father, you're not somebody's dad, you know, sitting in the house with them every day, right? And so, you know, all that is to say that if you look at these warring ideas and starting to grasp and put it in a more of a formula, which is what I'm attempting to do with the zero paradox, they all interact. And going back to the definition of success, where I was kind of going with that is the biggest thing that the crawl probably highlighted to me that I would never have said out loud before is that there's a purpose to my life that's bigger than the easy answers that I would give anyone. So my easy answer would have been like, I want to be a good dad, right? Okay, well, newsflash, if you're a dad, you should be a fucking good dad. That's part of the job. Like you
table stakes, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So like, so saying that my life's purpose was to be a good dad, like most people are great parents. They're flawed. We're all flawed, but most people are great parents because you're going to progress your family a little bit further than you got most of the time, right? So, but when that's your identity and you tie it to that, you're sort of letting yourself off the hook of like
what happens when they move out.
Yes. Because you don't become a dad or a father. Like that is your role to a certain extent. And people depend on you and then they don't, they shouldn't.
No one's saying don't be a great dad, but I mean, where I'm hearing this go, because we did talk a lot about identity. When your identity is tied externally, that can be taken away. And then what happens? So why we want to connect it internally.
So we were kind of talking about vision at one point in one of our chats, right? And so the part that I didn't feel like I was prepared to say out loud, but what was very apparent to me is that having my focus on such a small target was a little bit so it was a little self-serving. And then it was also me playing small too. Because it's great. Like I do aspire to be a great father and I try my hardest to do that. Right. Yeah. But to say that that's going to be the biggest impact that my life is going to have. Yeah. Right. That's kind of looking at it in a very small framework.
And I think this is where you're about to go. And I'll maybe say it for you. It's selfish.
It's
selfish of you to play small.
Yes.
Because you have, and I think if I may say, you said a word that I think is defining what success is for you is impact.
Yes.
And you have the ability to impact the world, and it's selfish for you to not do that. So you have a big give to get.
So you made so I don't want to interrupt you earlier, but you were when you were talking in front of our group, you made a really good point when you were telling people like, what is your mission? What is your mission? Yeah. Right. And it's actually funny so going back to the business side, because it's easier for me to deal with that sometimes, but going back to the business world. So when I started out as an originator, I was one of the only people that was in my office that made my own business cards. And I made my business cards and I put my identity on there, which was changing the community through home ownership.
Sure.
That was my tagline for what it was, right? So that's what I was doing. And that to me was the thing that charged me up was like, oh, I'm going to make an impact, right, on my community. I'm just doing it through helping people buy homes, right? So that's the way that I saw my identity that helped me push and do the things that I needed to do and stay on my goals and all that other fun stuff, right? And as you were talking, and it's funny because you were asking people for their definition, right? And I've actually made that point to them a couple different times, but I still know, I have a copy of that, 10-year-old business card still somewhere. But it's funny because I now look at my life and what I'm going to accomplish, and I do see it on a global level. And I never would have at all had the goal to say that's what I'm going to be on I'm going to have a platform like that. I'm going to hit that. And even now I haven't like openly shared this or talk about this a lot, but one of the things I struggled with the most from my accident was actually survivor's guilt. I had this PTSD wave of it was one comment on an Instagram post that I did where I did a couple posts as I was going through kind of the recovery process. Not a lot, but I just sprinkled, like I probably did like maybe 5 or 6.
Sure.
One of them kind of like went a little crazy. It had like, a high amount of views and stuff like that. People were sharing it. And I was like, okay, this is cool. Like most people are super positive and like, this is kind of, I'm not really about being all out there, but I'm like, what else am I going to do with my time? I love to market. So I'm like, I might as well play around with, throwing some stuff out there. And this one post that I did was after I had returned home, but I was still in a wheelchair. And it was this post about me, like I couldn't make it out of my bed for months. And then I couldn't make it to the couch. And then I couldn't make it outside. But now I can make it to the end of my driveway. It was like something, I put a bunch of clips of me,
Absolutely.
and I'm in a wheelchair, just reeling myself out there. And this lady posted, it was innocent, but she commented on my post and she said, my son and my husband were killed by a drunk driver 5 years ago. And I would do anything to see them make the progress that you're making right now. And immediately that old identity of, who am I? Why am I so special? Imposter syndrome came flooding back. And my honest thought was, why I'm not special enough to be here and those people are not.
Yeah.
Like why?
Yeah.
That hard reconciling of like, and it goes into all these different facets of like, your faith and this and that. But you start tugging on all these strings. And immediately I felt guilty for having survived and for pushing myself and all those other things. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm this poor lady. I'm probably giving her, she's reminiscing about, what could have been, but people that aren't here anymore. So it was this really dark inward place that I was in for probably like a month or two. I still at times it would trigger me here or there, but I was just like, I don't want to be out there too much with my story and things like that. Cause I don't want to, and not to go down this lane, but that's one of the things it's like a huge struggle bus when somebody's like, well, I know God saved my life. And the immediate question is like, well, why did God save you there, but not so-and-so there? Right. It's that whole, it's definitely not. But what I can say is I don't know why. I still don't know. I can't reconcile that part. But the part that I can reconcile is this, and this goes back, it ties this whole thing together, which is all I know is if I'm here, that I'm now responsible. And if I were to if I did survive the things that I have already, I'm responsible for even more. For what reason? I don't know. And I do get that. Like I had a friend that messaged me. She just broke her ankle, completely shattered, all this other stuff, right? So she's really not in a great place. And she's telling me that she's going to the hospital. And the one thing through her head is she's thinking about me. And she's like, I can deal with this if Thom can deal with whatever he deals with.
Yeah.
And I hear those little comments all the time. And so it has, like I said, I can't answer that question, and nor I'm not going to attempt to either.
And it's not a competition too.
But I do know that I feel the responsibility of having an impact for whatever reason. I know I don't know why, but I do know because of that, that's what I need to do. And I think most people, we all have sad stories to some extent. Mm-hmm. We all have some diversity we've faced in our lives. And if you haven't yet, trust me, it's coming. Spoiler alert, it's going to be
happens.
Yeah, we're going to get cancer. We're going to deal with these really traumatic things, right? So it's not an if, it's a when.
Yeah.
It happens. But at the end of the day, all that stuff aside, there's a saying, I might butcher this, but there's a scripture saying that says, the rain falls on all, both just and unjust. The rain falls on all, right? I don't know why it rains. I just know we're all going to get hit at some point. It's not really a metric of who you are as a person. It's just the fact that rain falls.
Rain falls, right? And we get wet. And I remember when I was going through, when I originally got diagnosed, with cancer, and we had a company event. And so, of course, I couldn't be there because literally my first day of chemo was at our company sales, but nobody really knew. I only told a few people. And I shot this video because, of course, I'm supposed to be on stage speaking. And I played this video. And I remember saying, and I didn't prepare anything per se. And, I just said, look, I got this. This one's mine. This one isn't yours. But you all are dealing with whatever you're dealing with. So while I got this, you take care of that.
Yeah.
And we'll see each other, as we get through this. And that was cathartic for me, and like you're saying earlier, sort of like I had to step outside myself in a way. And of course, I just put my leadership hat on, like, okay, I got to manage myself, getting through this. And of course, It's not that simple, but I can reflect and say that. But it was cathartic for me to go through and battle stage 3 cancer, to go through the chemo and the radiation and all the glory that comes with that I can do this. And if I can do this, that might help other people do it as well.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm not that, noble, say this in the, but it was sort of like, I got this. You
Yeah.
know, it's that ownership mentality. Like you said, that survivor ownership. I'm not going to be a victim of this. And that actually helped me fight the hard days.
Yeah.
When you don't want to, you don't want to keep going. You don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to like one more person sticks a needle in me type of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
No. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
But to your credit, and to give you some kudos too, because that was one of the things that was so inspiring for me. And yeah, we could judge situations and say that was worse or that was whatever. But at the end of the day, here's a couple of things that I observed from you just immediately, right? And kind of tying into this point is, you went through this, what a lot of people can use as a crutch, and I know it's traumatic, and I know you probably reconciled a whole lot, not knowing what all it was going to entail, right?
Sure.
But anybody that I know that's gone through a cancer, whether it was the smallest little cancer, the C word is a big word, right? No matter what stage it is, yours was a little bit more on the extreme side. But, when you were talking in that point of, going through the cancer situation, and then you lost your job and how that impacted you, and that was tied to your identity, to you saying, I'm going to go charge this hill. Like, you could have just been in a situation where you could have kept your status quo. And I know we talked about this at lunch actually today, but I knew it without you even saying it. Like, it's not like there was a lack of opportunity. It's not like you couldn't have gone and done blah, blah, blah thing. You held a title and a position and a thing that on a resume could have played in a myriad of different ways. Right. But at that point, you decided to go chase something and to go take on a battle that, I mean, not the same extent, but still your emphasis was on, like, I'm going to live something on my terms, right? Not to paraphrase, but, to a little bit. So to me, like, that's inspiring to me, because I'm like, okay, this person got up from one battle to pick up another sword and say, yeah, let's do
It's like when you get down with one battle, another one hits you
right.
in the
And
head,
that's, seeing people like that. And I think, and it's good for me too, because even talking about what, that whole survivor's guilt thing and all that, I think a lot of times, once again, like when we're in the middle, it's so difficult to prioritize what we're doing, or to put an emphasis on the importance that we have.
Yeah.
And I think, like,
and that's a really important point right there. The importance that we have. Because I think we lose sight of that when we get
100%.
stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
When we were in your meeting and you put up the word for the company here, offense.
Yeah.
And it made me think about something I used to kind of present on a little bit a while ago, which is, it's like your athletic stance, right? And you're either on your toes, right, playing offense, or you're on your heels playing defense. But what's worse than being on your heels playing defense is being flat-footed. And that could be complacency. That can be I'm stuck. That could be I don't know. That could be I lost my sort of way. And I think about that even like in the middle, parallel of what you're talking about, where in fact, I would even say that it's worse to be flat-footed than on defense, because at least if you're on defense and you're getting knocked back, you're in motion. Now let's figure out how we get back on our toes.
So great. Okay, so let's go back to the chess thing a little bit. So, and we're going to play some games together at some point. But okay, so when you look at your pieces on in your lineup, okay, so you have all your pawns.
Yeah.
Those, another term for that would be like, those are your small pieces. Okay. And then you have all of your larger pieces in the back. Those are your heavy pieces, right? Those are your rooks. Those are your knights. Those are the pieces that are multifaceted and can make all these moves, right? So to your point of being flat-footed, that's just you moving your pawns around with the idea that activity equals impact.
Yes.
Okay. So, I made a move.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm busy.
Yeah, I'm busy, right? And that's the middle that I was stuck in a lot, and I still do. I still do get stuck in it, and I have to yank myself out.
Of course.
We were just talking, and I was like, hey, I'm trying to reconcile. Like, I know some people would love to be in this position, so I do hold it with high regard, but it's not worth my time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is it really worth my time for what it is and what my goal is and what I'm trying to do, right? I have to reconcile that, because in some ways it sounds arrogant, because you're like, hey, I value my time too much to do this thing, right? But all you're doing is saying that, hey, when I make a move, that's one of my moves. It's not infinite, it's finite, right? So, but I'm the one that's picking up the piece. And and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with like launching stuff, and just to go on a quick tangent, but when you're in business, there is these times where you play with smaller pieces right? But the idea should be to get that piece across the board, right? And we were kind of talking, and I was telling you, like, after I've lived a little life and I've observed a handful of people, and there are people that I've met where I know whatever they do will be successful, not because the thing, but because they will drive that pawn down the board and they will make sure it hits at the end, right? And some people don't have that, or they haven't developed it yet. They're still working on it. But there is people where it's like, and I think that's the hardest place to be in, because you have so many moves you can make at that point, because you're like, the move is the widget. Like, the widget is the piece.
Moves matter.
Right. Yeah. But I do know that and you're one of those people where I told you at lunch, I was like, dude, it's going to be successful because I know like, I can tell you will do it. At where I have to reconcile sometimes, anybody that's in that high performer bucket, so to speak, is like, what move is worth my time? And am I pushing a piece down the board? Yeah. Will it be something that'll be yes. But do I already have pieces on my board that are already big?
Yeah.
These heavy pieces that I could move instead of being distracted trying to get these other ones across the board.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the most difficult part of what I went through. Was it's not, oh my gosh, I need to be successful. That part was already, like, been there, bought the t-shirt, all that other fun stuff by a lot of definitions. Right.
Sure. Right.
But impact and success, different lanes, parallel in some ways, but very, very different lanes.
But
and
I can see the definition of impact for you rising and having that meaning, and with the chessboard too, because moves matter, and we're trying to validate our moves, and we can get very stuck into, like, I'm busy, but am I productive? I'm busy, but is it good busy or bad busy? And from a leadership perspective, coach, leader, that's why I focus on, you have vision, you have strategy, and you have execution. And I'll parallel this to what we did today in the meeting. You have vision, you have mission, which is your purpose, and you have values. Well, I actually don't focus as much on the vision. I focus on the strategy and your purpose. Yeah. And there's a parallel there. So even going back to the multiple pieces on the chessboard and what piece are you moving, strategy.
Because strategy and purpose will put any vision to work, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Strategy is going to execute the vision, and strategy is the elasticity between vision and execution.
Right.
So strategy, and that's why chess is the ultimate game of strategy. You might be making small moves now to tee up the big move later, however you play that. And strategy is also what keeps us aligned. Why? Because drift happens, shift happens, and strategy pulls us back in line.
So even though this is being recorded, I'm going to think out loud right now, but I want your take on this. So, okay, so you probably are helping me define something then, because tying this all in together. Okay. So this idea of the paradox and the weight of it and planning your moves out and all of that. So going back to the board analogy. So you're right. I can totally see that. I can see how, and that goes back to what I was saying. I could see how if you put that behind any piece, it'll make it. The question really now, so this other variable is now, what piece is the most impactful? And it's got to be impactful, and you have to weigh that impact on a number of levels, right? So impact, I feel like impact, success will closely follow impact. I think that the two are somewhat tied.
Well, and I would say it's a result.
Yeah, but I don't think it works the other way. I don't think success.
I agree.
Okay, perfect.
I think and especially for where you're going, impact, the result of impact will be success.
Yes, 100%. Okay. But this way to weigh out vision now, and this is what I've had to reconcile, and this is part of me getting this on paper and structuring a book around these ideas and thoughts, right? It's nothing earth-shattering and it's nothing new. It's just perspective, right? There's so many great thinkers and minds and wordsmiths and all that other stuff. But the crux of this now and this reconciling is, what vision are you going to back? And this is the crossroads that I constantly find myself in. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about at lunch, which is, I'm now at the point in life where I truly do believe I could pick up anything and run it. Right. I know I can. Not to sound arrogant. That's not the deal. But it's just saying, because I do know the principles work, and I've seen them work time and time again. And anyone, not just me, I've seen them work. But the question now is the vision that you're attaching those to and the impact. And that is where I've had visions before where they were pawns, And the vision was, I'm going to get this pawn across the board and now it's going to be a bigger piece. And yeah, that's a thing. But I have also been scared of picking up bigger pieces using my heavy pieces on my board because I felt like it's easier to direct a pawn because that's a smaller vision and move that than to say, wow, this is a really big one, but I'm going to use this piece right now. And I think that's the skill that I am trying to learn now because I have a very high threshold for what I expect out of my life now. Once again, going back to it, it's not because of who I am, or it's not because I think very highly about myself. It's because I do feel an inherent responsibility now. I don't know why, but I know that if I'm here, I'm responsible, right?
Listening more now than maybe you were before too.
Listening
to why I need to make this impact, or why there's a greater impact, or why am I being called this direction?
I thought you were going to ask if I was listening to my wife because she would say no, but most of the time,
your wife needs to talk to my wife.
Yeah,
too.
exactly. Yeah. I'm taking in more data points is the best way that
I think that's fair.
That's probably, so where it's, I do this on a weekly basis where I stop and I sit back and I'm like, okay, I can do this activity. I can follow this vision, right? So to speak, I can follow this, and that will get me here, but that's playing on a smaller level. What's a big, let me zoom out. What's a bigger move that I can make right now, right? Like I could have it was the same typing. I could have just typed on one of your Instagram posts and been like, hey man, it was a great speech.
Mm-hmm.
That same me typing instead was a direct message asking you to talk to me, right? And I've done that on a multitude of levels now because once again, it's impact. Your world and my world are now colliding. I don't know what this is going to create, but I know there's a lot of great stuff that are going to come out of both sides, right? Right, 100%, right? So it's one of those things where it's just magnifying, but I do think that takes the guts to attach those tools to that bigger vision. And I don't think most people, okay, we talked about this a little earlier. So we talked about, we were looking at somebody and we were looking at what they produce and we were and you were kind of saying, oh my gosh, there's so much potential there. And I was like, I know there's so much potential. I think the potential's here. And you're like, I think the potential's here, right? So we're talking about this person and the amount of potential that they have, right? All of the pieces are there. Like, and I know you as a coach, you're probably there and you're like, it's like you walk into a kitchen to cook and you're like, I got eggs, I got this, right? And owning a restaurant, right? So like I've owned a restaurant for years and I've had a less qualified chef walk into walk in there and make something that was good, right? A sandwich or something like that. And I've had somebody, same ingredients, but I've had somebody that was a highly rated chef come in and make something remarkable where you're like, I've never had anything like this in my life. Same ingredients, same tools, same fire, same pan, all that stuff, right? It's just the execution and the skill set that's different, right? And I think I see that in most people. Like most people, it's not that they don't have the talent.
Yeah.
And it's not that they don't have the mission in them either. It's that they're attaching themselves to a vision that's a much smaller vision that they're comfortable with, right? Their vision becomes their identity. We were talking about that identity piece, right? Your identity is expanded and all of a sudden you're making different moves. And that's what I was saying today. Like you could run your business, your job, anything like a CEO. The title of CEO does not make you any different, right? It means you're looking at things. It means you're overcoming problems. It means you're judging market trends. It means you're forecasting. But anyone in any line of the chain could do that and make their life better, and they could climb ranks anywhere, right? Like but it's all the same things, and so that actually brings a lot of clarity to me too. It's definitely that it's attaching that vision piece because the vision isn't necessarily what drives anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the vehicle, right?
Vision creates clarity, it can create focus, but vision is not execution, and that's where a lot of people can get stuck in good intentions.
Yeah.
Right? We got a lot of good ideas. Maybe we're chasing squirrels,
right?
But without a solid strategy, I'll go back to strategy. That's when drift happens, or that's when non-execution happens, and so on.
Yeah.
And something else you said too, to maybe connect a couple dots, like there was two words, and I'm just going to call them out: At one point you said fear.
Mm-hmm.
At another point you said guts.
Yeah.
And I think that, because I mean, obviously fear is a factor in all of us, right?
Right.
Fear lives in our future, it lives in uncertainty.
Yeah.
Fear can create limiting beliefs. I mean, all the things.
Fear factor created Joe Rogan.
Fear factor created Joe Rogan, by the way. We come out of it's when fear can define and how we come out of that. But to have the guts or courage, or sometimes, and this is kind of funny because I would start a joke sometimes, like, like one of my superpowers, and maybe I said this to you before, like one of my superpowers is ignorance.
Yeah.
That is one of my, throughout my career, the evolution of my career and how I've grown. Okay, I'm going to take on this new role. I'm going to take on this new project. I'm going to uproot my family and take on this whole new job. And you know what? I'm going to be okay not knowing all the answers.
Yeah.
That was one of the biggest catalysts to get over what otherwise, like, I don't know the plan. I don't know all the answers. What if this goes bad? What if this goes bad? All the fear can grow roots. And then all of a sudden now we're sort of stuck where we're always, been.
Yeah.
But to all of a sudden, it's like, how do some people, and you being one of them, accident aside, I don't know BA version of Thom.
Yeah.
I only know this version of Thom, but I can't imagine there was a version before this. I see nothing but large impact in your life. I see nothing but great worldwide impact in what you do. And that ability to just go forward, have the guts to move forward, right? And bravery and courage and guts and all these things we're talking about, sometimes it's just a matter of like, I'm just going to take that one step forward. Even if it's I'm just going to move the rook or the pawn, whatever that piece is, I'm going to move it forward, but it's going to be in line with where I want to go. Even if I don't know the exact answer. Right. I'm going to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And that forward motion, that's also what helps kind of unlock that stuckness, right? The great unstucking, right?
Well, 100%. And like, that's, something, and I'm sure as coach, same thing too, where it's like, if somebody's got inertia, it's really easy to direct them.
Yeah.
The hardest person to direct is a person that's standing still.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're already moving, hey,
I can limb that this way.
Go that way. Yeah, you're already walking.
It's like when you go bowling and you put the rails up.
Yes,
I would say it's like,
100%.
don't this way.
100%. Yeah. So it's guts, courage, all those other things. Ignorance. In my case, I'll use the word stupidity at times, right? But I think, from my perspective, going back to another saying from my family, but my grandfather used to have a saying, and I think about all the time. And one of the sayings that he always had is, if a man can build it, a man can fix it. And he's got some legendary stories from his time I never got to witness, but where the family car broke down on the side of the road and God knows where, and he took his belt off and he fixed an engine component with his leather belt.
Of course,
and the car got them to wherever they needed to go. And so like that was always a saying that I heard growing up: if a man built it, a man can fix it. Right before my dad passed away, my dad used to say that, and I was like, Dad, those robots now that build some of this shit, like we can't exactly fix everything now. But anyways, but the thought was really, really good. And so I think that to your point, I think that the whole idea of stuck, and I don't think that you can just flip a switch and get out of a place, but I think that you can gain perspective and practice at any given time. And I have to do that too. And that goes back to the idea of this book. One of the things that after I wrote, I didn't have any input on the book as I was writing it up until I got the third of it done. And then when I got to the point where I got a third of it done, I created a writing coach, an AI writing coach. And so I created the personality. I put all the pieces that I want. And I was like, now I'm going to just dump it in there, So I was like, here. And it'd be easier for me to listen to a robot than a person. Or I had a couple of friends that were like, shoot it over, let me read it. And I was like, I don't want you to read this at all. But in the dialogue that I had, my wife was... she thought I was writing, and actually I spent a whole weekend going back and forth with this AI.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole.
It took me on a rabbit hole. Yeah. So Tars is my ChatGPT personality that goes through and helps, and it was helping me edit. But one of the questions that the AI bot asked me that literally shook me was, the question was, do you feel like you've arrived? Like, reading through this, like, do you truly feel like now, post accident, you're in this place where you've arrived? And I had to stop, and I really thought about that. And I was like, just, give me some clarity on like why you're asking this. I was like, because the easy answer is no. And they're like, okay, well, but the way that you wrote this, it makes it sound like you've arrived somewhere. So do you truly feel like that? Like, is that how you operate right now? And to be honest with you, and going back to this idea of like being stuck, like, no, I feel like I'm at war with myself more now than I've ever been. It's not a peaceful place. I'm at peace in a lot of different ways. And I'm Kai, if you're watching this, I'm tracking my sleep and doing all these things to be in a better place. But so it's not that part, but the constant struggle of I need to push myself. Am I getting too comfortable? Am I using a smaller, am I bringing myself back down?
Yeah.
Am I hiding? And it happens on sometimes a daily, but for sure a weekly basis where I catch myself and I have to go back and I have to reconcile decisions I'm making and moves that I'm making. And I have to course correct myself. Like, hey, if you're going to make 5 phone calls this week, what's one of those phone calls that's going to set you on a path to this bigger thing that you're trying to accomplish? And I make one of those phone calls, right? It's not something that's easy, but it is a strategy. To your point, like those strategies are, if you hang on to them, they're going to pull you through whatever that situation is. And, we haven't really talked about this, but just to ask you, put you in the seat a little bit. But, as you were going through that situation with health, I mean, what did you cling on to? I'm just curious, like your take on it.
Endurance.
Okay.
So, when I was going through that, and the reason why endurance comes up is because early on, when I put my sort of like, okay, I had to put my management hat on. Okay, how am I going to manage myself through treatment, right? And so that became my one word, right? Our theme, our one word, And that for me is like, okay, it's not that I have cancer; there is cancer. So therefore, I just have to endure treatment.
Right.
Therefore, every single day I wake up and I look through the lens of endurance. I am strong, right? And I would joke, like, people would say, hey, how you doing? I would just send like a strong like bull type of thing, an arm and a bull and, strong like bull. But that's why it was so important in order to not get pushed back or to be stuck in just the woes of all the bullshit of, treatment. I will endure every day. I walk in, if I go to the hospital, I'm getting my chemo treatment. Like, all right, stick me, doc, like, I will endure. And enough days will go by and I'll get on the other side of this. And so that was my theme, and then certainly coming out of that. And then, when the company shut down, I found myself, losing my job 6 weeks after treatment finished. Like, what the fuck is going on in my life?
I'm like, endure some more.
Oh my God. But endurance was like, it wasn't that at that point.
Yeah.
Now it was shift.
Right.
I need to shift,
Yeah.
And of course I can say this in reflection, certainly wasn't always that easy, but once I made that decision, once I declared that this is who I am now, I moved forward with nothing but faith plus grit. And that's how I, move forward. And it doesn't mean I don't fight fear and limiting beliefs. And like you said, this, that, or the other, or battling, because it's like, I call it the baguette principle, right? Like good begets good, hunger begets hunger.
Yeah.
And so the more that you keep striving and building, you're like, okay. So I can understand like ChatGPT and writing almost as if there's this arrival, but like we never feel like we've arrived.
Yeah.
So there's this, and it reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen this. Okay, so one of my favorite shows is The Office.
Yes, I love The Office.
And there's a great quote from Andy Bernard, Ed Helms. And you might know it's on Instagram, and it's one of the most beautiful quotes ever. And I've heard him quote it now today as a human. I wish I knew that these were the best of times during those times.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm not saying it correctly, but to that, flavor. And that makes me think about what ChatGPT
I think it's the good old days. I think he's saying
that is it.
Yeah.
I wish we knew we were in the good old days during that. And that makes me stop and sort of reflect. And I think as we've talked about, time moves fast. How do we slow down? Okay, this is good. This is a really good moment. We happen to have the cameras on. We're in a podcast form, but I actually forgot that we had the cameras on. I thought we were just having a conversation again.
Yeah, at least we're in person this time. Yeah, because it's
totally. And this is the first time we've met in person.
Yeah.
So look, brother, I love where you're going, man. And you have such an incredible story. I mean, look, unfortunately or fortunately, the accident has put you on a path. And maybe it's brought clarity and a higher meaning and an impact into your life. I think you're destined for success and for large impact regardless. But just like for me going through, my health stuff or going through what, the job loss, which impacted me more than cancer, but it put me on this path that I have never felt more purposeful in what I do.
Yeah.
And I know for you, for me, for us, wherever we go forward with this, I know we're going to be going forward.
No, absolutely.
And I think that, we're on our toes. Even when we get knocked down, we're back on our toes.
Right. Right.
All right. Last question. If there was one word that you want the audience to remember from this conversation? If there's one word that stands out to you right now, if there's one word that's meaningful to you right now, what's your one word?
You know what? It's going to be a couple words.
That's okay,
but
too.
I'm going to give you, and it's funny because every time I share this, as you were talking about, because I was really curious your process because we hadn't talked about that, going through that. So one of the things that my dad, going back to his lessons, one of the things he taught me was go to work, no matter what is going. And I use that in a bad way a lot of times. But let's go back to the concept of being stuck or, making shift happen and to go to the context of like a lot of what you're trying to do is push people, right? And I think that's the strategy piece when I was going through my issues and going through recovery and there was a lot of navigating that I needed to do because am I losing this leg? Is that going to keep? Do I have to do this? I was in the hospital for a month before they found out that my knee was injured. And I was like, I just can't move. Like, I know this is, but like, what about this part? And they're like, oh yeah, your patella snapped.
We missed that
part. Yeah. So anyway, so there's a lot of navigate, but the thing, and I think going back to preface it, like it can be used in a bad way too. But my parents, my dad taught me that, and he was like, no matter what happens, you just go to work. And when that happened, and I woke up in the hospital, and I was I had the tube down my throat and all this stuff, like. My immediate thought was like, I just got to outwork this situation. Yours was endurance. Mine was like, I got to just whatever. I don't care if I can move a finger. I'm going to move that finger 1,000 times a day to get wherever I need to go. And that was my attitude with my doctors. And that even to this day, like that is my attitude now in any situation that I'm facing. And so I do just want to throw that thought out there. My parents on their tombstone, and I share this, people kind of look at it a little bit weird, but it literally says like their names, and it says like the quote is go to work. And I knew that my dad would have been happy about that because the last thing he would have wanted is for me to sit there and stare at that stone.
Yeah.
He would have wanted me to move on and go do something productive, right? Or take care of the family and all that other stuff. I did. There was a traumatic swing, and I get all that. Well, that's another podcast episode. But the point is, though, I just want to encourage anyone, no matter what you're facing right now, that's the part that I think that mental gymnastics that you could play to say like, no, that's all good. I'm just going to navigate this. I'm going to outwork this. I'm going to endure this. I think those are all really good mindsets. And I think those are the people that I gravitate towards the most. Like, it's really difficult for me to get around people that haven't faced trauma now. I don't know. I think I kind of asked you that one time a little bit. Yeah. But I was like, it's real. But I have somebody, they're like, oh yeah, my life is great. And I'm like, yeah, like I mean, you're cool. But for some reason, just having those people around me that have gone through adversity, in an extreme way, like I love those people. Like I like other people, don't get me wrong, but those are the people where I'm like, oh my gosh, it's an energy exchange where I'm just like, yes,
I've said to people too, a friend of mine, was diagnosed with cancer not too long ago, and I texted him. I said, "Hey, welcome to the club you never wanted to join." And it's but it's time to go to work.
Yep. Absolutely. So I hope that helps people no matter where you're at on your journey, and I'm so happy to be here, and, thank you for everything and the time,
No, I appreciate it, brother. And I love our time together. And it's been such a good conversation, and there's such a to be continued from this conversation.
Yeah. So, I feel like that's all of our conversations, but I'm always amped up after we talk and all that stuff. And just to throw it on there too, this is a social thing, but you definitely follow me on Instagram, and there's going to be, I'll be putting some information out there. I'm hoping to have this book project wrapped by the end of the year at this point, if not a little bit sooner. So I'd love for you guys
to tell people where they can follow you on Instagram.
So you can follow me on Instagram. It's actually on my band here. So
about to show your tattoo.
Yeah. So when I was in the hospital, I got these pictures, and my immediate rebranding, which people were like, oh, wow, Thom must be doing okay. Cause like within the first 48 hours of waking up, I don't think I could talk, but I changed my Instagram name, and I changed my
priorities.
So I rebranded myself as like Rebuilding the Doctor. That was my name on there and all that stuff. Yeah. And then so Hashim, when I was meeting Arjun, Hashim's like, hey bro, I just gotta be honest with you, your Instagram name's stupid. I was like, okay, thanks, dude. It meant a lot to me, but
so this is
a little while after. So
okay, it wasn't while you're in the hospital.
But but I got a bunch of photos, and so I kind of wear this as a reminder. But one of my friends made a bunch of these little wristbands, and it said Dr. Thom Strong, and so they would be out, wherever they were out at, they would send me photos of it because I was trapped in a hospital. So you can follow my Instagram. It's Dr. Thom Strong. A lot of people think I was like into weightlifting, but I'm very much disabled, but I still do some stuff. But you can follow me on there, and I'll put some more information out there. But
and I'll have all the information in the show links, and you guys are you're gonna be seeing a lot more of the mortgage doctor here. You're gonna be seeing a lot more of Thom here, and I can hardly wait for your book to come out. You're gonna see more. You're gonna see Thom on stages more. You're just gonna see the impact that Thom is gonna leave on this world, and keep and keep doing the work and moving forward. And by no means is this gonna be our only conversation on this podcast, and I'm sure many more. And I've got lots of introductions to make for you as well. So I appreciate you talking shifts with me. I think everybody in the audience, please reach out if you have any questions. I'd love to help make the connection to Thom. But I appreciate it, brother.
Absolutely, thanks, man. Yeah, definitely.
All right, everyone. Appreciate you joining us. Welcome back to the Talking Shift show, and we'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for joining me today on Talking Shift. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on our next episode.